Meg from beyondbeingwell.com. Welcome to Module 3, the soul stuff. So by now we've covered a lot of the physical stuff, and we've talked about physical health, and we've tried to reconnect with what you intuitively know is going to help you feel more energized, less stressed, more vital throughout the day. And the physical part is such a big component, and it is something that a lot of us spend a lot of time focusing on because there's lots of people talking about it. There's lots of external cues that can help us to be reminded to do work on our physical bodies, because we know that's going to help us live that life of health, freedom and purpose. And then we've also just gone a layer deeper and talked about what's happening in the mind and how that's affecting our well-being. And so I hope by now in Module 2 you would have understood the importance of cultivating mindfulness either through a formal practice in meditation or so forth, or more informally throughout the day by reconnecting with the present moment, learning to control your breath, really learning to look at your inner landscape with a lens of self-love, self-compassion and not judging. A lot of our suffering by now, I hope you understand, is caused by our own reflections and our own thinking processes, which can sabotage us into thinking things are worse than they actually are, and can sabotage us into really leading a life based on decisions made from fear rather than decisions based on wholeness, that understanding that we know deep within us that the next step that we're taking is right for us. So today we're going to go to the last layer, and there's a reason why we do this last, because often when I chat with clients at the start, they want to change everything. They want to change their health, they want to change their careers, they want to leave their job because it's making them sick or tired or stressed or burnt out. And without having developed an understanding of the physical body and then also the mental body, the mind, we can often make decisions that are inadvertently still coming from that place of fear. And so I leave this until the last because by now we have some practices and some inner awareness that we can build on to now look at the bigger picture. So what is right for us, and what are we meant to do? And do we have a purpose? And what happens if we're not living that purpose? And how is that going to impact our health and our experience of life? So today it's a shorter training. It's all around this purpose soul question. And I'm going to use those two words a lot, but I want you just to get the sense that we're peeling back more layers and going even more in depth. What do you at your core really need, really want, really desire, really know within yourselves what's right? And I'm going to give you some tools of how you can tune into that so that going forward you can use that tool or that technique to make decisions that are really going to serve you. So let's dive straight into the training. I'm going to share my screen. If you've got a notepad and pen, I would love if you could get that ready. So here we go, the soul stuff. What we're going to talk about in today's training. Number one, what constitutes soul food? What do I call soul food, and how is it relevant to our journeys? I'm going to talk about this idea of purpose and intention. They're two words that are used a lot, particularly in self-help, personal development, and also spiritual circles. And I'm going to really define my version of that based on my own work on myself, but also the work that I do with clients. And I'm going to break that down in a way that we can get beyond the idea that there is one right thing for each of us, and that if we're not doing it, then we're destined to a life of sickness, or we're destined to a life of unhappiness, because I just don't believe that that's true, and my experience has been that that's not true. So we're going to go beyond the rhetoric of those words and really uncover what purpose means for each of us. And then we're going to take that into talking about the career stuff. And I'll break down this soul journey into three parts so that you can really have a framework that you can work with when working through this deep inner work. We'll talk about the relationship stuff, because I believe that a lot of the way that we relate to other people is really part of how we relate to ourselves. So we're going to break that down, knowing that how we relate to others forms such an enormous part of our experience of life. And so many of us want to cultivate deeper, more meaningful connections, but perhaps lack the capacity or the self-awareness to understand perhaps why we rub up against people the wrong way, or why people might perceive us in a certain way, or why we care so much how people perceive us. So we're going to dive a little bit into that. And the purpose of this training is not to give you all the answers, but to really spark some inner wisdom for yourselves, and to really foster some more thinking and journaling and reflection on your part in terms of, where does this stuff fit in with you? Is it a priority? Is it not? Are you honouring yourself? What else could we do to really make sure that on the body, mind and soul level, all three components, we're integrated and we're aligned? I'm going to talk a little bit about contribution because, again, a lot of my clients specifically are really passionate about making contributions to their communities and to the world more broadly. And I'm going to talk about a framework that might help in thinking about how you might want to incorporate a form of contribution into your lives going forward. I'm going to talk about integration, which is an enormous challenge for a lot of us. We tend to go through life clinging on to good experiences, good feelings, and the good parts of ourselves which are rewarded and which achieve and are successful. And we disassociate from those feelings, experiences, behaviours that we deem as bad or unhelpful. And in doing that, we actually fragment our whole being into many parts. When we start relating to ourselves conditionally in that way and saying that this is good and this is bad, and not accepting the bad or the ugly or the flawed, we're really setting ourselves up for this feeling of being a million little parts. And the integration piece for me was so enormous and is an ongoing challenge for me on a day-to-day basis. But module 2, the mindfulness work, is really the set of tools that can help with the integration. So finally, we're going to talk about the monthly challenge as well. So what is soul food? Just like our bodies and the mind, our soul needs nourishment. And I break down the body, mind and soul into 3 components, not because I believe that they're separate. In fact, we are very much one whole being that is interconnected. I break it down because it's easier to conceptualize this way. So when we talk about the soul, what I'm talking about is underneath the thinking, rational mind that we use to solve problems, that we use on a day-to-day basis in our work tasks, that we use to provide the rational framework for life. And underneath the physical body, which is the thing that we're all familiar with, this meat sack that we're walking around in, there are deeper parts of us, the subconscious and even deeper within that, that often we don't truly understand how to tune into and how to nurture. But within those parts of us, there are clues that can help us to lead a happier, healthier life. So nourishing the soul for me is about learning not only to tune into those parts of ourselves and really discover where they are in the physical body and in relation to the thinking mind, but to interrogate the relationship between these 3 components. The secret for me is learning how to tune in and to honour the deeper desires and instincts. That when we remove a lot of the thinking mind stuff and a lot of the noise and the drama that we create is there all along. I'll give you an example. There might have been times in your life when you intuitively felt pulled towards certain things, and there may not have been a whole lot of rational thinking, contemplation go into making those decisions, but you felt really drawn to something or someone. And it's those instances in which the soul is really doing the speaking through you. And a lot of the time our work is not to interrogate it and not to overthink it. It's to actually remove the boundaries that we put in place around the subconscious and around the soul, and actually just make room for that to play out. I know that we've all had instances, for example, for myself, I always felt drawn to working in the health space, and that manifested in a lot of different ways and a lot of different interests and a lot of different jobs. But at the core of it was always this deeper understanding that this was an area that I felt that I could make a contribution, and that I felt I had wisdom in. And when I made that subconscious need conscious, I was able to realize how much I'd been putting all of this expectation, and I'd been putting this idea that it had to look a certain way, that I had to be working in this certain space. And now I realize that actually there's a lot of different ways that I can interpret that deeper longing to work in this space. And that's why I have changed careers and explored different things. But unless there was something pushing me deeper, something driving me deeper, I wouldn't be where I am today. And if I hadn't have just stopped and listened to that and really learnt to honour that wisdom that was coming through me, and kind of gotten out of the thinking mind's way of it having to look a certain way, if that makes sense. So how can we nourish the soul? And these are just a few examples. I'm sure for each of us, they'll be quite different depending on your understanding of this space and your nurturing of your deeper intuition up until this point. Our soul can be nourished, in my experience, by working on our relationships and by creating loving connections with ourselves and with others. So it can also be nourished by activities and creative outlets which encourage the state of flow. And the state of flow is something that a lot of health practitioners are now studying, because it sheds some wisdom into the state in which we feel completely free of worries, anxiety, and stress. The state wherein we are so connected to the task or the thing that we're doing or the person that we're with, that time is irrelevant and everything else is irrelevant. And you're almost in this state where you're not thinking, where something deeper is coming out. And that state of flow is what subconsciously a lot of us are trying to create through our hobbies. And, you know, it's the reason we do yoga and dance. It's been that totally connected to the present moment. And I believe that creative outlets or activities that body work, you know, that move the body in certain ways, are two ways that we can learn to encourage flow, be in the present moment, and therefore connect to that deeper subconscious place. So I always say that if we do have creative outlets that we used to be really in love with and they used to serve an outlet for us, whether they be our profession or not, we should always try and incorporate them back into our lives in some way, because they just provide so much space for integrating our experience, for learning new things, for growing, and for connecting exactly with the present moment, which is, as we know now from the mindfulness piece, such a great way to reduce our suffering and to really be grateful for what we have already in this exact moment. So soul food could also be, you know, the careers that, or the jobs or the tasks that use our unique talents and our intrinsic characteristics. So they're those things that we love doing, not because they bring us external reward or gratification, although that's okay as well, but they're the things that when you're doing them, you're almost into that state of flow and you're channeling something deeper that maybe you're not even consciously aware of. So we all have tasks that we're better at than others, and there's wisdom in learning to understand them and learning to foster them and learning to start slowly taking steps towards using them more often, because in doing that we'll gain confidence, we'll have a greater sense of achievement, we'll have a greater sense of going with the flow of the river rather than holding on to all the twigs along the way. And then obviously soul food is self-love. It's a lot around self-compassion, which I know we've talked about as well, particularly if you've been one-on-one coaching with me. Learning to develop self-compassion really helps to give the inner voice a microphone, if you like. When we clear out all the noise about what people think we should be doing or we think we should be doing, and we really connect with, it's okay to be feeling this way right now, it's okay for this moment of suffering to be there, and we see that it passes, that is the ultimate, I guess, gift of self-love that I can think of. It's also, I guess, soul food is intuitive development, so really learning to tune into this part of our body or our mind or our being. And it's also mindfulness. So fostering mindfulness, present moment awareness without judgment nurtures the soul, because we're not caught up in the stories or the dramas of the mind so much. So these are just a few examples of how our soul can be nourished, and we're going to go through a few of them now. Firstly, really important to understand why we would be talking all this woo-woo, why it's important in the health picture in particular. It's something that is beyond the conventional wisdom of green smoothies, and a lot of people probably dismiss it and say, I don't have time to really nourish the soul part of me. I'm so busy just, making sure I go to the gym and making sure that I, do my 5 minutes meditation a day. I don't have time to really think about where I'm going or how I relate to others, or how there are things bubbling up inside me at the deepest level that I don't have time to deal with right now. I always say that, when we go through periods of intense growth, personal growth, or intense challenges, it's often our inner selves pushing us to more fully expand in the world. And it's our inner selves inviting us to live a life that is aligned in terms of our deep intuition and our values and our purpose and our external world. So the job we do, the people we see, the things that we put our priorities on. When we get alignment between those two things, suffering is reduced. But what often happens is we don't make time to really listen to those feelings, those emotions that can run rampant in our bodies, and instead we dissociate from them, or we push them aside because they're not really convenient. Right now, I don't have time to have a career crisis because I have all of these things to do. And, I believe that so much of this is about letting go and letting that river carry you and seeing where it takes you, rather than clinging so tightly onto an expectation about how you will be in the world. Because my experience has been, clinging is just the most, beautiful, dangerous cause of suffering that I can think of. And so much of our existence can be characterized by us clinging onto experiences, clinging onto good feelings, clinging onto expectations about how we should be. And this training is an invitation for you to let go and to see where the river takes you, because there is no right or wrong, there's no success or failure. There's just your journey and an invitation to expand to your greatest potential. So aside from that, why nourish the soul? I've already talked about the physical health benefits in the last couple of trainings of mindfulness, for example, but stress and anxiety are such huge, huge players in the way that our health is expressed, and that includes the weight that we carry, the hormones that are running through our body, what we put into our body, what we get out of our body. Stress and anxiety are fundamentally not things that we want to invite into our bodies on a day-to-day basis. And yet, in our current societies, with the thinking mind and with the expectations that we put on ourselves, stress and anxiety have become the norm. And there is a physiological downregulation that happens of our systems one by one when we continually ask our bodies to live in that fight or flight mode day in, day out. And a circuit breaker for all that is really taking the time to stop. And if the body is sending signals of pain or of illness or disease, and we haven't checked in and said, what is this? What is this an expression of? And what is my body telling me right now? Then, you know, going deeper than that and focusing on the career stuff and just changing jobs without having done the reflection on this deeper soul stuff. What do I really want to do? What does light me up? Can my physical symptoms have any relationship with how I'm treating myself, how I'm behaving toward myself, and what I'm expecting my body, mind, soul to do? Without asking those questions, physical health just can't be achieved. So the physical health component, you know, of course, by being more mindful, of course, by stopping the constant flow of negativity going on in the mind through our mindfulness practices, is going to be massively benefited. But also when we really connect with our why, with the reason that we're doing things, the reason why we're making changes, then the actions that can support our physical health flow so much easier than when we're trying to make decisions on our health in a vacuum of information about what our soul, body, mind really needs. And this is what I find the most of with clients, is this disconnect between goals. For example, I want to run 5Ks, from their vision, which is to live a life of connection and purpose and contribution. Unless there is a clear link between the 5Ks and the connection and the purpose piece, it's going to be really hard to find the intrinsic motivation to do that. And without knowing what you want on a deeper level, and without understanding the expression of how your subconscious is pushing you and driving you, then we're just going to continually set ourselves physical health goals that are going to leave us feeling depleted and unmotivated and lacking confidence, because we're not able to achieve them, because they truly are just not going to light us up in that way. They're not going to lead us to having the feelings that we deeply crave. So second reason is obviously that we all want to feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment. And you'll notice that the language I use around the soul is feelings. And feelings are physical sensations. They're also physiological hormonal processes that come in and out of the body, sometimes according to when we want them to, and other times they'll just come and go on their own. And you'll notice that in the first module, I talked about physical sensations in the body. In the second module, I talked about thoughts, but the language of the soul is feelings. And so really starting to understand that if we want to start to speak this language, we need to start to examine our feelings and to relate to them differently to how we are currently. So when I talk about a sense of purpose, that contentment, that peace, that alignment, that flow that you get when you're actually doing something that really lights you up internally, we all know that feeling. It's expansive, it's warm, it's fuzzy. We can actually feel it in the body. It's usually in the solar plexus, lower ribs area. And that's the language that we need to start using, and that's soul food. Like when we get those feelings, we know that we're nourishing the soul. Number 3, nourishing the soul helps us develop a better understanding of self. And this whole journey is about understanding ourselves so that we can better make a contribution so that we can be better human beings, so that we can be better in relationships, so that we can make impacts on those people around us, there is no, I believe, use in reflecting on the selfishness of journeys like this, or that this is just navel gazing, or, you know, who am I to reflect on what my soul needs. Honestly, the best thing that you can do, if every human in the world did some level of self-understanding, self-awareness practice, I believe the world would be a fundamentally different place, because we would learn to understand the difference between the ego, for example, and the soul. We would learn to understand the negative effects of thinking patterns and limiting beliefs. So really having the intention to develop a better understanding of self is beautiful, is a beautiful intention, and I think something that definitely can come from this focus on the soul and this deeper wisdom that we all have. It promotes energy, so energizes us, and I've talked about this, I think, a lot in my webinars and a lot of other videos online, and maybe in the other 2 modules as well. But, you know, learning those activities which fill up your energetic cup, your unique energetic cup, so that when you want to draw from that cup, there is actually stuff in there. You're not giving from an empty cup. Often those activities are things that at a deeper level we really connect with. For example, for me, being in nature is something that is so intrinsic to my energy levels. Being around green, you know, I absorb that energy and that feeds my soul, but it also, at a physical body level, helps me feel energized throughout the day, because I've done something to fill up my cup that it really is unique to me. Not everyone feels the same in nature, although a lot of people do. So learning those activities and tasks which help you feel aligned, expansive, happy, content, peaceful, they're the keys of what we should be doing more of. And then obviously, as I've already said, it helps us to give to others and to feel compassion for ourselves as well. So step 1, how do we even begin this journey? Particularly if we haven't done any of this work before, we've got no spiritual practice, we haven't done yoga or meditation. This can seem really scary and a little bit like woo-woo and out there, but believe me, it's quite practical. So the purpose of getting to know the inner landscape is to understand the individual workings of the body, mind, and spirit or soul as we are as individuals. So the task is not to understand other people's inner landscapes, it's to understand ours, and to really start differentiating between physical sensations, feelings, and thoughts, and then beliefs as well. And all of those 4, I hope by now in coaching that you've started to think about them in a different way. So the methods for really beginning to understand the feeling body or the soul is mindfulness meditation. And there is a free mindfulness meditation on my site. We can do mindfulness meditation in coaching. There's some great resources from mindfulness-based stress reduction courses. But really the intention with mindfulness meditation is to start to tune into the present moment without judgment. And we can do that in a number of ways. One is by focusing on the breath, because the breath is always present. And there are other ways, lots of other methods as well. But the intention is to calm the thinking mind down, and we do that by focusing on something else. And in calming the thinking mind down, we begin to see patterns. We begin to see thoughts coming into the mind and leaving. We begin to see sensations coming into the body and leaving. We begin to see feelings coming into the body and leaving. And we get this great sense of how impermanent everything is, and that despite our suffering, we can sit there and observe it all in an impartial way. And such a gift, because when we know how our bodies and minds and deeper wisdom works, it's like you've got a shortcut to behavior change, and you've got a shortcut to becoming a better human. in your own way, whatever that means for you, expansive. So mindfulness meditation is a great practice to start, and we can talk in coaching about how that might work, but I encourage you to at least try some very basic mindfulness meditation and see how it makes you feel. See whether you become any more aware after, 5 or 6 days or even a couple of weeks, ideally 30 days of practice, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. See how you relate to the inner landscape differently. Another quick way of getting to know the inner landscape is tuning in. And tuning in is just a method where you just basically close your eyes, and everyone has a different way of doing this. But you just ask yourself the question, what's here? What's here? And feelings are often present in the chest and the stomach. It's where we feel feelings or the effects of feelings. So without getting the thinking mind too involved, we just learn to deeply breathe with the eyes closed, asking what's here and seeing what arises, seeing what impressions arise. You might get a great sense of sadness, the heaviness of the chest. You might get a sense of fear, a fluttering in the tummy. These are all wisdom that is coming from your inner landscape that we can either listen to or we can ignore. And it's not about creating a story around it, like why is it here? Why did it come? It's just about acknowledging it being there and seeing how it might change. Journaling is a great way to get to know your inner landscape. I find writing, sometimes I just write a question. What should I do about this situation? Or why do I feel like this? And then I just start writing, and the subconscious through that vehicle can relay information to us in a way that we can't often get without an intensive kind of meditation practice. So journaling regularly, despite what you think about, I'm not good at writing, I'm not good at journaling, just try. There's no success or failure. Just try to develop the language around your inner landscape through that. And it will begin to become clear the causes of suffering and the patterns that are yours that we can then work on. So coaching is obviously that process out loud where I ask questions and I prompt further reflection and I reflect things back to you that you might have said that can help us to really determine what we want and why we feel like we're not getting it right now. A lot of the time our thinking minds, we try and think our way out of situations or bad feelings, and it's just not helpful because we get stuck in these loops. But having someone else say, you just said this, or this is what I heard, it can actually create this level of self-awareness that we didn't have before. And for me, it's a great tool, and I still have coaches, and I will probably for a long time to come, because I really believe that investment is worthwhile. And then kind of that active reflection. So finding a way to actually ask in a non-judgmental space, what do I feel right now? And remember that the words here is around feeling. It's not what you're thinking. It's not about what's happening in the mind. It's about the feelings that you're feeling. So getting to know the inner landscape can help. It can help promote boundaries in the way that when we become more aware of perhaps why we're overgiving, where that deeper need to please people is coming from, we're able to put a stop to that and to say, actually, no, what's important for me right now is some self-care and looking after myself. It can improve our relationships. It can help us understand the cause of our suffering, and it makes us feel empowered and able to promote positive behaviour change. So the first step in any of this purpose stuff is finding a space to tune in to what is going on. What is your deeper self telling you right now? So let's do this exercise, tuning in exercise briefly, and we'll see what comes up. If you've got your pen and paper ready, just have it there, but just shifting on your seat to sit up straight and putting the feet on the ground. Making sure that you've got some connection with the ground, feeling the weight of the buttocks on the seat. Just start to take some deep belly breaths. Breathing the air right in down to the abdomen. And exhaling, letting the shoulders drop away from the ears. There's thoughts, just letting them be there, but having the main focus on the breath, deepening, coming in and out of the belly. Now do an exercise so that we can differentiate between the body and the mind and the soul. So I want you to picture someone that you love. I want the image to become very clear in your mind about what that person looks like, all of the physical characteristics of that person, what they're wearing, how they stand, their gesticulations, having the very clear image of them in your mind of what they look like. And you'll notice that that geographic location of where that person is in the mind. So usually people will feel when they're envisaging someone they love, the physical person, and it would be in the front of the brain or the forehead area. You can physically see a 3D image of that person. So that's the happenings of the mind. And that is when we use terms like I think. It's usually coming from the mind place. So letting that image go and then taking a couple more deep breaths. I want you to now think about how that person makes you feel. So you can imagine the image again if that's helpful, but tuning into the second layer, which is how that person makes you feel. You might feel a warm flood of love in the heart area, butterflies in the tummy, a sense of expansion or excitement, a sense of peace that you feel when you're around them. And usually the location of these sensations is in the torso somewhere. And it's very different from just the 3D image because now you're connecting with how that person makes you feel. And it's this body, this area, this energy that I want us to start to tune into. So letting go of the image of the person you love, and then just deep breathing again. I want you to just ask the question, what's here? So keep breathing. There's thoughts going on, that's fine. Just come back to the focused attention of breath. And see what impressions come when you ask the question, what's here? And you might feel the question drop into the depths of your physical body, right down into the lower part of the abdomen, the pelvis. Like something dropping into a well. What's here? And just without any expectation about something coming up or questions or answers or thoughts, being there, just letting go of all the expectation and seeing whether anything just naturally arises. Any feelings, any impressions. Maybe even a word will come into your mind. about what's here. But there is a deeper wisdom that can come up when we're still, that's beyond the thinking mind. The thinking mind might interpret it. All we're giving space to is that wisdom to show itself. What's here? Maybe it won't show itself now, but later something will come up, an impression or a thought about an action we should take, and that's maybe because we gave this time to asking what's really here right now. So now deepening the breath, feeling any connection with it, feelings or impressions that might have come up. Just coming back to the room when you're ready. If any impressions did come up, just writing them down. Things that might have come up might have been feelings. What's here? Fear. What's here? Peace. What's here? A sense of calm. Whatever you felt, or maybe an impression came up, what's here? An impression of a word like an action that you might need to take, focus on. Resistance, a word might have come up like that in your brain. We've just given some time to tune in, and I hope that that exercise helps you to understand the difference between thinking and feeling, and therefore what we're really learning to interpret through this work. Moving on, step 2. Now we've learned to tune in, and we need to cultivate that. It's not something that just comes from 5 minutes of meditation, but doing deep breathing, for example, learning to actually stop in the heat of a rushing moment, activate the relaxation response through our deep breathing, and then say, what is this? What's here? Or what is this deeper need that I have right now that might not be being met? What are my needs right now? They're questions that can help with that, but you need to start to practice and do that regularly for you to be able to connect with your deeper desires and deeper wants and deeper work that might be there. So the second step, once we've learned how to do that, is to honor what you hear. So honoring those impressions that come up in those moments of stillness through what we choose to do with our time. And this is where the kind of whole question of purpose comes in. And for a long time I believed, and I looked for the one thing that I was going to do for the rest of my life that was going to make me feel whole. And once I just found my purpose in life, everything else would be inconsequential because I would be doing that one thing. And what I've found since, through a lot of my own work and through clients and a lot of reading, is that I don't really believe that we all have one purpose in the sense that we talk about it. I believe that we all have very unique characteristics, conditioning, souls, physical bodies, thought patterns, beliefs, which make us able to do certain things in a way that makes us feel a greater sense of achievement than if we were doing something else. And from that comes great confidence and happiness. But fixating on this idea that what we do for a career, for example, is going to be the magic thing that makes us feel better, I believe actually disempowers us, and I believe removes us from the inner resources that we have. And it fixates us, it stagnates us by putting us into a pigeonhole that we have to stay in for the rest of our lives, which, you know, disregards the very fact that life is flexible and organic and flowing and ever changing. So on that note, we may not have one purpose, but there are things that we either feel expansive doing or alive, or there are things that make us feel depleted and depressed. And again, we're tuning into feelings to give us a sense of what our inner wisdom knows. So think about, for example, right now, what in your life makes you feel expansive and alive, and what makes you feel depleted and depressed. And think about the balance between those. Are you having more activities, tasks, relationships that are making you feel expansive, or are you doing more things that are making you feel depleted? And if there's a feeling of dissatisfaction, is that any relationship to the fact that you're spending most of your time doing things that are depleting? And so this is the framework that I want to use to talk about this question, because following the feelings is a way that we can start to move towards making decisions from wholeness versus making decisions from fear. Fear leaves us depleted. Making decisions from wholeness leaves us feeling expansive. So that's the first point. The second point I want to say is the fixation on what we're doing actually prevents us from seeing the much more important factor in life, which is how we do things. And I'll give you an example. When I quit my job thinking that it was my career that was making me sick and unhealthy and stressed, which to a certain degree it was, I had no appreciation of the fact that it was how I was doing that job that was leaving me burnt out and depressed and anxiety-filled and sick. It was how I was going about all the things in my life, not just work, but I was fixated on work, that was really making me feel unhappy. And the how at that time was very much around rushing, around having to prove myself, around making decisions from fear, around having to achieve things because I felt not good enough. It was constantly striving. And that how is going to exhaust anyone. So even though I quit my job, it took a long time, probably 6 to 12 months, for me to realize that I actually had to change the way of being, totally the way of being, that I needed to stop striving and rushing, and I needed to find stillness and space to connect with what I really wanted, what I really desired at the deepest level, and beyond just a new job to make me feel a sense of achievement. And I had to get to the bottom of why I had been feeling the need to push myself to that level. So I've seen a lot of clients come and they're like, I hate my job, I want to quit. And what I always say to them is, there's obviously something that's pushing you right now to want to make that decision. That's a great start. That's a great internal wisdom to have picked up on. But tell me what else is going on. Like, how do you behave at work? What are the patterns that you've noticed in your behavior which give you clues as to why you might be dissatisfied? And yes, there is often a huge disconnect between what we're doing at work and what we would like to be doing. And we need to listen to that. But making a decision out of fear to get away from careers that we think aren't serving us, but in fact we're just doing in a manner that's not serving us, is, in my experience, a mistake. We need to first get out of the fear zone and connect with, well, what is really important in my life? What are my values? What are the feelings I desire? How can I set a roadmap to start to move towards them? And it can be literally on a day-to-day basis. How can I do more activities that make me feel expansive? The more you start to honor yourself, the more confidence you get to take the next step to what's next. And the decisions are coming from this much different place to, I just need to get away. I hope that makes sense. So the last thing I'll say on this is that, we are the sum of many different influences, and there are a number of things we can do for paid work, for example, that enliven us. And I always say, if we're unhappy in our job, or we're unhappy in the activities that we do day to day, we have two choices. We either change that, but changing the external situation without changing the internal beliefs and patterns can lead us up for more dissatisfaction or suffering. So we can either change the external, or we can change our mindset about those things. So for example, what are we doing in our careers right now that is serving us? How does what we do enable us, for example, through money, to live the life that is important to us, to have the friends we have, to do the hobbies? You know, if we're stay-at-home mum, for example, what is this time allowing us to do in terms of our own personal growth, and how are we contributing to society by teaching young children about how to find their way in the world? So changing the mindset about our situation or about ourselves and what we need. For example, when I started shifting the mindset around I'm not good enough, wow, I didn't need to get the next promotion. I didn't need to get the next job, because fundamentally within myself, I knew that that wasn't what I really desired. What I really desired at that time was freedom and health. And those were the things that I put my priority on. And the work stuff was, I just didn't have the need to achieve and strive and succeed so much, because I felt more happy within myself. So changing the internal way that we are can make a drastic difference once we start to interpret, well, what's our soul really telling us right now? You know, there's lots of different personal development, business stuff around how to find what you really love to do. And my best advice on this is that we need to stop looking for the one thing that we're going to do for the rest of our lives, and embrace the fact that we change and circumstances change, and that our desires one day might not be there in 5 years or 10 years time, but that if we make 1,000 little decisions to honour ourselves on a day-to-day basis, the sum of that will help us to live a life that is so much more aligned internally and externally. So a lot of people say, I can't make a change in my life, particularly in my career, until I get all my ducks in a row. It's like this idea that, well, if I have everything in place and then I make the leap, then that'll be perfect. And my experience has been, you actually need to start trying different things. You need to start seeing what makes you feel expansive. A lot of the time we have these fantasies of when we were little, of, you know, being a scuba diver instructor, and then when we actually do it, we realize that that was a fantasy from when we were young, and that it's not as relevant now, and that different things light us up now. So the cultivation of intention here is so important, because if our intention is to live in life in alignment, to live a life that's really in tune with our inner wisdom, and that we're expressing that inner wisdom through our external actions, then the actions will start to flow naturally, and you'll take one step forward, maybe a couple of steps back, and then 5 steps forward. And it's that kind of journey that the more you start to listen and honour that internal wisdom in terms of what you really want, regardless of what other people think, the benefits and the feelings that you'll feel from that are so great that you will be encouraged to keep going. So my advice to this is just keep coming back to what is important to me right now. What are the values I want to express? What are the feelings I want to feel? And how can I take an action today to honour those feelings? I've talked about this before. So when we want to make a change, we can either 1, change the situation, or 2, change the mindset about the situation. So if you did want to do some more work in this area, the career, the purpose area, some example questions that you might want to ask yourself are, number 1, if I didn't need money, I would. What would you do if you didn't need any money? That will give you a clue in terms of to what you actually enjoy. Number 2, the types of work tasks I enjoy. So what within your current job or activities do you enjoy? Which parts of it? Is it managing people? Is it teaching? For me, you know, I say that we don't have one purpose, but for me, I believe that my strengths are that I am a teacher and that I can teach a lot of different things and they would all light me up. But when I feel flow, it's when I'm standing in a room full of people, usually women, and I'm helping them to understand themselves better. And that's come across in many different areas of my life. And I can see now that there is a common thread in all of it. So there are, I guess, we do have purposes in terms of how we're going to express ourselves to feel most expansive. And for me, that's teaching. For other people, it's creating. For other people, it's fostering connections. For other people, it's analyzing. So they're really good analytical minds. So think about when you feel in that natural state of flow within your current work or life. And if you don't feel it, then maybe that is insight into time to think about something else. So what would people describe you as if they asked you? And sometimes some of my clients actually do this and they ask their friends to describe them because your friends tend to know you in a different way to how you know yourself, because we always relate to ourselves in an extremely self-critical way. We're not good at receiving compliments. So hearing other people describe you, they're often able to hit things at the soul level that we can't access ourselves because the rational thinking mind is getting in the way. So what are your most important priorities right now? Is it family? And if it's family, then is going after a promotion at work really what your soul wants? Or is it what is coming from a place of fear? My most important values are things like connection, health, freedom, adventure, contribution, wealth. What are the most important values for you right now at this point? They will give you insights into the soul. This is a great one. If there was no risk of failure, what would you love to do? There was no risk of failure. What would you do today? Number 7 gives you insight into why you're doing things. So I usually do things because. So how are you going about life right now? Is it coming from a place of honoring yourself or is it coming from a place of fear? I enjoy working with these types of people. So who do you love being around? I thrive at work what are the things you need in place to help you feel that expansive, energized feeling? Is it that when you have support? Is it when you're working autonomously? Is it when you have flexibility? Is it when you're working with others on a project with a deadline, or is it when you just have all day to create? Number 10, I feel energized after a day where I have done what? What did you do in that day to make you feel energized, and why did that help to make you feel energized? So these are just example questions, and obviously in one-on-one coaching, they're things that we can work through together. But if you are starting to think about what is my soul telling me, and is it time for a shift, time to let go, see where the river takes me, it's really important to do some of this deeper internal work first. So let's do a quick exercise now about what your soul is actually telling you. It could be in relation to your career, it could be in relation to your family, relationships. So I want you to just, with your pen and paper, you don't have to close your eyes, but you can if you'd like. Just answer this question. Just write down whatever comes out. The question is, if my soul could talk, it would say. Imagine that from this deep internal well, you were able to hear a voice and it was telling you what you deeply, intuitively already know, but which maybe you haven't been able to access until now you've been in this safe space thinking about it. So if my soul could talk, it would say, maybe it would say, it's time to start honoring yourself and setting boundaries. Maybe it would say, it's time to dance. Maybe it would say, it's time to embrace those you love and focus on that. Maybe they would say, it's time to move to somewhere greener. Maybe it would say, it's time to realize that what you have is perfect right now for you. Maybe it would say, it's time for some self-care. And what is your soul telling you? Is it, it's time to reconnect with my creativity? Just whatever comes up, write down one or two things. Don't overthink it, just see what's coming from the deep internal recesses rather than the thinking mind. Because we all intuitively know. Sometimes we're just afraid to write it out or say it. So there's the internal work that we need to do, but there is external things that we can do to help us. I've already talked about some of these, so these are just some examples. Number one, choose activities or tasks that inspire and enliven, and adopt this attitude of curiosity. If cooking is something you've always wanted to do, what's the harm in going to a cooking class on a Saturday and seeing whether that does still light you up? Reawaken all parts of yourself and explore, especially the creative side. So think about how you can get into flow more often. So let go of the expectation that things need to be static and fixed and we need to have everything figured out right now, because none of us do. And the last example is remember the energy bank account. So can't keep drawing on the energy bank account for tasks that deplete you without putting energy back in. So step 3, now we've tuned in and then we've got this kind of work around aligning our external activities with what our soul is saying. The step 3 is to surround yourself with people who nourish your soul. So relationships are a major cause of stress, and like anything, we have 2 options in these situations. We either remove ourselves from the stressful situation or we change our perception of that situation. So think about a person for a moment that causes you stress or anxiety, and consider for a second whether that suffering is due to the fact that they are a fundamentally stressful, awful person, or whether it's that your perception of them has changed to the point where they're causing you suffering, or they're hitting a button internally that is not serving you right now. So think about that person and then think about whether the idea of removing yourself from that is more appealing, or the idea of changing how you relate to that person or taking the charge, negative charge away from that situation is more appealing. And the reason I get you to tune into that is because a lot of the time we blame everyone else for the way that we're feeling. But the truth of the matter is only we can affect how we're feeling. And we can't actually change the behavior of anyone around us. on a minute-to-minute basis. Over a long time, of course, we can influence people around us, and yeah, maybe even through moments of kindness, we can change people's day in a moment. But if we're talking about relationships that are really stressful, a lot of the suffering is caused by the fact that they're not seeing us and meeting our needs, and that we interpret that as their fault. And really, it's not about fault, it's about how can you reduce that suffering. And for me, the suffering was reduced in my relationships drastically when I stopped blaming them for my own feelings that were coming in my body. So on the relationship part, I'm not going to go much more into it, except that I want this to be an opportunity for you to reflect on how the people around you are supporting your soul to be nourished. Do you feel enlivened after you see people? Do you feel connected to communities that can help really see who you are as a person and honor that person? Or are you stuck in patterns, in behavioral, stressful behavioral patterns in relationships that maybe aren't serving your soul right now? Surrounding ourselves with people who encourage us, nurture us, help us to expand is absolutely critical on this journey. And then step 4, once we've kind of got the internal environment aligned with the external environment, and then we've surrounded ourselves with this beautiful supportive tribe, is that you will start to really expansively give to people. And you will be giving from this place of magnetism, and you'll be giving from this place of knowing yourself so deeply that it is almost overflowing. And that's the point that a lot of us want to get to. So when we align our world with what's happening inside, it's easy to feel inspired to give to others, because we're suddenly relating to people differently. We're seeing people in a compassionate way because we've started to see ourselves in a compassionate way. So the best gift that we can really give to others is to be happy and healthy within ourselves and to know ourselves. That journey, the journey that you're all on right now watching this video, you're inspiring others by doing it, because you've actually had the courage to say, I want to be better and I want to know myself, and I'm not afraid to ask questions and to take actions that I don't know the outcome. So my advice in terms of the contribution piece, I guess, of the soul part is to find really meaningful ways to give back that align with your values and intention. So remember, I asked before, what's your intention, your priority right now? If it's around family, find ways to give back there. That's just as important as giving, to charity or volunteering. Giving from a place that I should do it or someone else is doing it is just going to lead to depletion, and it's not really fair on the people you're giving to. Instead, we should be looking for 1,000 little opportunities every day to give, and we all have them at our disposal. It's just about waking up and seeing them. It's those little actions that really, at the end of our days, are important. So think about your values, your intention, your priorities, and come up with a way of giving that benefits that. What are your skills? What are your values? What really lights you up? And you're going to be able to give much more sustainably from that place than I should be giving. I should be making a contribution. And with like everything, there might be times in your life when you're giving a lot, and there might be times in your life when you just need to pull back and focus on your own self-care, and that's okay. It's all part of the flow of life, and we can't, again, get fixated on this static idea of who we are. So step 5, I said there were 3 parts, but obviously there's more. Sorry about that. Step 5, integrating the parts. So we are in truth really multifaceted beings. And my experience is that part of feeling whole is about accepting all of us, our perceived flaws, the yucky emotions, and any perceived physical issues. The more we disassociate from the bad parts, the more likely we are to feel this disharmony. So self-compassion and self-acceptance are the keys to integration. And when I talk about integration, it's about, I guess, looking at the sum of our experience of life, the good and the bad and everything, and recognizing that it's all part of us and owning it without making it as a victim story. So it's about saying, yes, it's part of me. There is good and bad, and I need the bad so I can appreciate the good. But it's all part of me, and I'm going to bring it all along with me. The minute that we start to disintegrate is really the start of suffering for me. So another beautiful intention to foster in this work is the integration part. And a lot of work that I do with clients can be around that. But if you wanted to do your own work, think about having a look at some inner child meditations or the like. It's a great place to start to connect with parts that we may have disintegrated or disassociated from. So as our last exercise, and as a way of connecting with how far you've already come and integrating that, because as much as we're bad at integrating the bad parts of us or perceived bad parts of us, we're really terrible at integrating good things that happen to us as well. And that's so much part of it, because integrating the good gives us the confidence to go on. So I want you to just write down 3 things that you're proud of achieving in the last 12 months. Three things you're proud of achieving in the last 12 months. And really taking a moment to look at them and fully absorb them, opening your chest, breathing it in, and feeling that success and that achievement and how you felt. It might be something really small, it might be something large. It might be inner work, it might be something external, but what are you really proud of deep within yourself? So much of the soul work is about learning to see the good in us and appreciate what we already are and how we're already whole. Because from that place, we have the strength to really follow that inner wisdom. Practicing receiving is part of our work. So I wonder how it feels looking at those things that you're actually proud of and seeing if you can integrate them into your being at this moment. Focusing on those things, not just the negative. Good job. So in summary, it's not what we do, but how we do it that's important. So aligning our outer world with our inner world can truly enhance our well-being at the deepest level. Taking time to develop your intuition and getting familiar with your inner world is critical. Learning to trust the inner guidance when it comes is key. And I believe that we may have many purposes in life. So continuing to move and evolve is more important than getting to a static end result that we have in our mind. So how did that feel? I hope that you gained a little bit of wisdom from that training and just some more, I guess, opportunities for reflection as you go forward. The challenge for this module is to start to have a practice where you tune in to your soul. And that could be a couple of minutes each day of just asking what's here. Could be journaling, committing to journaling, a couple of pages a day. But I want you to write down now a commitment to how you're going to nurture this part of yourself. Could be just doing more activities that make you feel expansive. Could be getting a more supportive tribe around you. What did you take from this training that's an actionable step forward? I hope you've loved this training. I really look forward to seeing you or hearing from you soon. Best of luck with the soul journey. Hope you are feeling enlivened and connected right now. See ya.